Hey man, let me give you some advice.
What if I don't want your advice? Complete stranger I've never met before who's talking to me for no other reason than to progress the plot?
My advice is that you should take my advice.
It's like a telltale game. My choice doesn't even matter.
Listen, guy, if it's raining, bring an umbrella.
That's not really advice, just common sense.
If you give a mouse a cookie, you'll probably ask for milk.
You stole that from a kid's book.
Life is like a box of chocolate. You'll never know what you're gonna get.
And you stole that one from Forrest Gump.
Hand over your wallet and no one gets hurt.
That one isn't even advice, that's a... Oh. You know what? I'll take that advice. I want you to go on a trip back in time. Not literally, mentally, and not this far back either. Back to when you first started playing TF2. Chances are, you probably sucked at the game, and you got backstabbed constantly, had poor aim, and probably had a fashion sense like this. But you got better with time, through practice and sheer determination, all on your own. Not like the coaching system helped, nor these terrible loading screen tips. That's right, if you couldn't read the title of the video and are just now realizing what I'm talking about, it's these classic loading screen tips. A nice small addition to every single video game ever. I mean, what else are you gonna do while the level loads, huh? May as well get some tips and tricks about the game, and by God, does TF2 have some sick Tony Hawk level tips and tricks. No, wait, I meant Tony Hawk and like Boom Boom Sabotage level of tips and tricks, because a couple of these tips suck. Starting off, the loading screen tips relating to Scout. Nothing wrong with this tip exactly, to be honest, just that it doesn't apply to Scout exclusively. You're telling me that if a spy or a pyro uses a flank route, the enemy isn't surprised by them? Like, the enemy team is just expecting them to be there? Obviously, the Sandman no longer stuns enemies on contact, just a passing reminder of the days of old in my youth. What's really odd though is, despite the fact that this tip still refers to the Sandman stunning enemies, this one specifically states that it can only slow them. This one is technically both incorrect and correct. The usage of the word mid-range here is pretty subjective. If we want to use the textbook definition of it that the wiki and Valve uses, however, the distance is from this spawn door to this wall on 2-4, or roughly 800 hammer units. Of course, depending on spread, the SHORTSTOP can deal more damage or less. Worst case scenario would be 12 damage, with the best case being 48, depending on how many bullets hit. Conversely, the SCATTERGUN, which has more bullets in addition to an increased damage ramp up, can deal a minimum of 6 damage if only one pellet hits, and a maximum of 60. In most situations though, due to how the SHORTSTOP has a tighter spread compared to stock, it's more likely to deal more damage. Health kits. Kits, as in plural. Simple fix really, just need to move this one around, get this, carry the 2, paint this piece here orange, go ahead, get a llama, and presto! Fixed it. Soldier only has one tip that I can find fault with. You may say to yourself, oh, Valve did a good job with his tips then. Well, this tip is probably the worst one out of them all. Clearly, whoever wrote this tip has never played an actual match of TF2. You mean to tell me people try to be sneaky when they aren't spy? If someone has a frying pan equipped, you already know it's sheer rambunctious tomfoolery that hooligan plans to get themselves into with it. Pyro, on the other hand, has a small handful of problematic tips and a whole slew of redundant repeating ones. Starting off, we have... Now yes, this is true. However, there isn't a single tip that accounts for the gas passer and its unique ability to ignite enemy pyros. And I didn't really know where to mention that, but here. It's a niche circumstance that would be playing a pyro against a pyro with the gas passer, but still, videos about issues with the tips, and a lack of a gas passer tip is an issue. And you know what, Valve? I'll give you some credit. You tried to make the volcano fragment work with this tip. I mean, the degreaser and extinguisher are already perfect for this combo, but you gave it your best shot. I'll give credit where credit is due. This one clearly shows its age. 2 other shields for demo have obviously been added now. This tip just needs a small word change from the charge and targe to any shield. And finally, we have like 8 air blast tips that overlap each other. Can't complain about it too much, I guess. It does help reduce WM1. DEMOMAN, specifically Demo Knight, has some questionable official tips going on with it, starting with this one. Now this tip has been in the game since launch, but for those that have been playing the game prior to Jungle Inferno, knows that despite the fact that the bottle was supposed to break open on critical hits, it never did, simply because that code is broken. Same thing for the Neon Annihilator and Scottish Handshake. So, despite this tip being 13 years old, it's only been relevant and actually practical for about 4. The questionable Demo Knight tips all simply use a charge and targe like the Air Blast tip from before, despite 2 other shields coming out, like I said prior. Very quickly we have, which, not dealing random crits isn't actually a balance point, but alright Valve. Also, apparently they do know about the other shields, since this tip also exists. Heavy has 0 redundant, incorrect, or vague tips. I mean, he is the poster boy for TF2 after all, so Valve kinda had to get his tips correct. Now, despite the fact Engineer is the most complicated class to understand and get a grasp of, having both himself, dispensers, teleporters, and even sentries for new players to learn and get an understanding for, he surprisingly, Engineer doesn't actually have any bad tips. They're all quite easy to understand, and they aren't redundant. Good job. Medic, on the other hand, and the concept of Uber, yeesh. First off, a simple semantic issue, clearly outdated due to new mediguns being added like the Kritzkrieg and Quick Fix. Now you've heard of Uber masking before in competitive plays, covering up the medic's voice line so the enemy team doesn't know you have Uber. But get ready for Uber confirming. I'm speechless. Anyways, what's the next bloody Uber charge isn't as important. Oh, bloody hell. This other tip isn't helpful either. I mean, I suppose you can alert another medic to help you, but it's not like your team can see you call for medic and instantly know your location. Just communicate over text or voice. Sniper has really painfully obvious tips that really shouldn't need to be said. Like, in addition to the most painstakingly obvious tip in the world, shoot enemies to deal damage. That's like the level of tips we're on. Even Spy isn't safe from the obvious tips, with, in addition to his tips being slightly hypocritical. Finally, we have this little Diamondback tip that seems to omit the fact it also saves crits on backstabs. And there it is, all the tips and tricks Valve expected and accepted players to be able to understand and get a grasp of. Granted, most of them are perfectly fine with 0 issue, but that's only due to the Jungle Inferno update correcting and fixing a majority of them. And it's not like we've gotten anything new to really make this information outdated. Maybe they'll fix up these little tips and send them on their way so new players don't think Uber isn't ever a welcome and needed part of a game. And then maybe they'll fix the coaching mode.